Here's a question for you, gang. Do you like your receivers tiny and quick or long and fast?
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, gang, thank you for hanging out with me. Greatly appreciate it. Making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate it. Again, thank the folks from FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, when you're the NBA's official sportsbook, they're letting folks know if you want information on the NBA or UFC or college football, FanDuel.com has you covered. Download the app. Make sure it's easy to use. Care what age you are, what generation you are. This is an easy download and easy use. Go to FanDuel.com and use /LockedOn to unhinge some new perks and benefits. Make every moment more on FanDuel Sportsbook. I asked the question: how do you like your receivers? How do you like them? And the answer is never the same. And depending on the receivers coach, depending on the offensive coordinator, depending on the head coach, each team and program and history has its own identifier. They have their own preference is probably the word to use. And in listening to Nebraska's receiver coach McGuire speak and then Matt Rhule speak, a lot of the conversation is in preference. But an interesting thing is in play, and I want to talk about that over the course of this episode. In the first half, we'll talk about the short, quick receivers. The short, quick receivers. There is a batch. Like this wide receiver room has two different factions, and they have the short, fast, quick receivers, those slot jitterbug kind of guys, possession guys who can move the chain and create problems in short space. And then the other side of the room, the other half of the room, are the long, athletic track burners, the guys who stretch defenses and give safeties nightmares. And both seem to be prevalent at Nebraska, and both seem to be a big part of the weaponry. But when you hear Nebraska talk about it, when you hear the coaching staff talk about it, they want big plays. And that's got to be just absolutely warming to the heart for Nebraska. I mean, again, a year ago, the Nebraska fans knew what Trey Palmer did for this football team and this program. His ability to stretch defenses and just be a big play guy, stretch the field. He and his relationship with Casey Thompson and their ability to match up on big plays is a big part of Marcus Satterfield's offense, is that he wants to be able to put points on the board with a quickness and to be able, at the very same time, to be able to ball control and simply be more physical than the defensive opponent. But all things are an option, and the question is what the preference is. But when you look at Nebraska's roster and you look at the players and you watch them in the receiver room and you watch them as the receiver group that goes through their NDs and their group work, that they have quite a few athletes who just look different in size. There's a group. I mean, if you talk about one group that, they're 6 foot and below, and to tell you, Billy Kemp IV, don't get mad, Billy. My apologies in advance. Billy's probably 5'8". Not that it matters, because he's rock solid, amazing feet, great hands, high IQ. Again, the UVA level of education. You can get in Charlottesville. You're a smart kid who has 60 and 70 catch seasons under his belt, which means he has no fear, which means he can take a beating. He also has productivity at the kick returner and the punt returner position. He also is pretty good about taking the ball in the reverse and getting some work done. But the same can be said for Joshua Fleeks. Listen, the same thing is in play. Now, he's very familiar with Coach McGuire and what's required, and that's going to be an interesting thing in itself. And when you're transitioning for some folks who play together and now one's a coach, and one's trying to find his way in a new program. But each coach, every coach, wants somebody in that room who can be their voice in the room, somebody that can show, okay, this is what I want. Okay, Josh, let me show them how I want the bang 8 run. Show them how I want you to come off the screen here. This is what I need. This is how I want you to catch the ball, change level and location at the same time, and then get vertical. He has that in Joshua Fleeks. Fleeks is 5'10", 180 pounds. To think about this room, there are folks that we'll talk about in the next segment that good-sized, but not the same as the folks that were recruited who are all above 6'2" and run below 4.6 40s. Folks like Malachi Coleman, I mean, that's unique talent. Those are sprinters. They've got 4 legitimate sprinters. If they ever decide to field a 4x4 400, they've got some dudes. They're all long. They're all lanky. They all can run like the wind, and then they'll learn how to be receivers in the possession area. But the group that we're talking about in the Smurfs, as we want to call them, they're all little, they're all quick, and then they all have the ability to help this team in the return game. All of them can play outside, and if you put all of the smalls, all the Smurfs on the field at the same time, you create some defensive problems. They're tough to tackle in open field, and they change the direction pretty quickly. It's all pretty interesting to watch and to consider and ponder. This is a good group, but here's the thing. There are folks that, I mean, if you talk about Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda, I mean, they list him at 6 foot, 180 pounds. Good size, actually was a starter when the season started a year ago and went through. He did a really good job of breaking down in a post-practice presser his process and what he went through a year ago, and leaving the team and going to transfer portal and then just waiting it out and trying to see what options were there. But he chose Nebraska. Joshua Fleeks was at Baylor, could have gone anywhere. Decided to come here because, hey, his buddy and his coach was here. Billy Kemps could have gone anywhere. Billy Kemp IV could have gone anywhere. Again, a 60 and 70 catch years consecutively. Yeah. In the ACC, folks want like that. That dude has value. Xavier Betts. That's another one that, listen, we can run that jet sweep all day. We've seen what happens when Xavier gets a little room in one block. He can make some wonderful things happen. But we'll talk about Betts, and we'll talk about Marcus Washington, and we'll talk about these young, long, athletic track guys who are going to catch footballs for the University of Nebraska. We'll do that when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey, gang, thank you once again for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Look, we're weeks away from spring game all over the country, and we're about a month away from the NFL draft. You can your second watch and listen each and every single day. Should be the Locked On the NFL draft. Again, great breakdown. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, I will talk about the Huskers who are a part of the draft process and what we can expect and want from them. But we'll go around the country. When you jump on Locked On College, Locked On NFL Draft, they will break down where they think some of these top players will go, Nebraska included. We'll even have that discussion. We're talking about receivers, and on the back end of what happened with all the little guys and the jitterbugs and the folks, the Smurfs, the guys who can settle in space, move the chains. They're tough to tackle in open field. They're much smaller and much quicker than linebackers coming downhill trying to capture them or at least corral them, and it creates problems for defenses. It creates a nightmare for defensive coordinators because you're demanding that the toughest players to tackle in open field get tackled in open field. And Nebraska has some guys who can, Get the quarterback, get the ball out of their hand, get it to these guys, and let them do their magic. And it'll be a case where sometimes you just hold your breath because, you run that wide receiver screen and you get Kemp or Fleeks in motion, and you get them with some momentum and those Flintstone legs moving. It's tough for a linebacker to play catch up, and it's tough for a safety to come downhill and try to make a play on somebody that's just a little smaller, just a little quicker, just a little faster than they are. But that's part of the advantage, and that's part of what I would imagine we see spring game April 22nd. You're going to see some of these guys, but on the other side of it, Coach McGrath said today that they want to recruit receivers by these three things. And it kind of caught me off guard because he said height, weight, and speed. That's what we want to recruit. We want tall guys, strong guys who can run really fast. And I went, okay, that's not abnormal. But that wasn't exactly who was in play. Marcus Washington, you would think of him as a guy who can stretch the field, but you would almost think of him as a high volume catcher rather than a high production when it comes to yards after catch, that you're not going to use him to stretch the defense the way they did Trey Palmer a year ago. Xavier Betts is listed at 6'2", 200 pounds. I would imagine that he's a little shorter and weighs a little bit less, but he's kind of the tweener in this thing. Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda at 6 foot 180. But then you recruited guys like Malachi Coleman. You've got a full list of wide receivers who were recruited as track guys. They're recruited as guys who could just flat out run, flat out burners. And with Marcus Satterfield last year at South Carolina, look, he put up big plays. Now, he had a big play quarterback and big play receivers. I don't know whether that's the case this year, but we're certainly looking forward to what it can be because, listen, if you've got a receiver group that has that kind of depth of guys who have all played in the Big Ten and guys who have all been productive in the Big Ten, and some at a high level, in another Power Five, and you've got the Sean Hardys of the Husker world, who from a physical standpoint checks all the boxes. He looks the part. But how are you going to get him on the field and win? What are you going to do when you get him? Look, all the names that we've talked about, at some point, I have to admit, at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw all of them either on kick or punt return at some point this season. That's the type of athlete we're talking about, and that's the type of athlete on this roster. That immediately you think of 6 receivers who not only can play the slot, but could get outside. You can play X, you can play Y, you can play Z, and then you can return kicks as well. Oh, and by the way, we can jet sweep with you. All of that's in play, and I think, I would hope that that's on purpose. They spent time today talking about Alice Bullock and the fact that he's making plays in practice. Cooper Houseman making plays in practice. They've got some guys who are putting in work, and because they're getting such a high volume of rep, look, they're all getting more familiar, and they're all getting more comfortable, and they're all feeling better about what's being asked of them. Now, are they all Big Ten ready? Well, again, there's a whole bunch of them that have already put in that kind of work. But then the question becomes, who's going to be tasked with getting them the ball? And who does it better than anybody else? What's going to be best for this receiver room? Is it Casey Thompson and his ability to throw the big ball and his familiarity with playing in the Big Ten under this tent and not feeling, too small in the moment? Or, Logan Smothers, who's gotten starts both the past 2 seasons. And this is where normally the game starts to slow down for young quarterbacks. Logan Smothers was doing it under rapid fire and under not much notice. But now he has an opportunity to do that. The same can be said for Trevor Purdy. Got to start last year. Under fire. Took the heat. Then got injured. So Nebraska will get to see over the next 10 days what they have in the receiver room and then what they have in the quarterback room, because the two are connected and they both rely on one another. And who's starting at quarterback will tell you a lot about who's going to get the most playing time at receiver. Because if it's a running quarterback, a breakdown guy, option routes are wonderful, but you can stretch the field and get defenders out of the space, and you can turn the head of a linebacker, then it's Jeff Sims one-on-one with a linebacker who's got his head turned away. Or it's Casey Thompson, who can get the ball out of his hand and throw it big and long and put points on the board without having to, consume, 4.5 minutes on 11 plays. Not that there's anything wrong with it. We'll take it as long as there's touchdowns at the end of it. But we saw that he can do the work with the big ball. But you've got to protect Casey Thompson. He took an injury last year. He took several injuries last year. You're going to have to protect him. So it'll all play into effect, and then we'll get to see, does the running game take the burden off? If the running game is rock solid and good, Jeff Sims looks better and better. If the running game is sticky and unstable, then Casey Thompson to the rescue, can throw the big ball around and get some points on the board. But there's a lot in play when it comes to this receiver group, mainly because it'll help us look at the offensive group. We'll talk about the other thing that's going to be required of this room. All of these receivers that we're talking about, special teams matter, and they're all going to have an impact. We'll talk about that when we come back to Locked On. Hey, gang, again, thank you so much for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Please subscribe. Jump down there, hit the subscribe button, get this content sent to you each and every day. You don't have to look for it. You don't have to worry about it. We'll send it to you. YouTube takes care of all of that for you. Greatly appreciate it. Watching practice under the current rules, we get 25 to 35 minutes a day, usually during stretching and individuals. There's often at the end of that some special teams work. And listen, Coach Foley has been spectacular. Great energy setter, great standard setter, very verbal, very communicative about what he needs from and wants for the players that play for him. And as the Huskers deal with roster number situation, scholarship number and situation, the guys who play the special teams and contribute on a regular and consistent basis will have more comfort and get more respect. They'll also get more play and less wear and tear. But when it talks about kickoff returning and watching, and Fleeks was back, Kemp was back. That's a thing to pay attention to. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, he was back. We all know that Xavier Betts could help them in the kickoff return game. And I'm not sure that anybody else is excluded from it. Tommy Hill got some reps a year ago. I'm not sure. But what I would tell you is it's a great way for you to make the team. And it's a great way for you to make the travel squad. And it's a great way for you to get more reps at receiver if you're being productive and effective in the kick return game. And it's going to be necessary and it's going to be important. And I love the pace and energy. Look, Coach Foley is coaching them up. He really is putting in the work, paying attention to detail, got his eyes on the small mechanical things, the things that players on the wedge, we're not supposed to call it a wedge anymore, but those lead blockers, where their hands are, what kind of footwork, what kind of energy is required. It's good to know that Nebraska is putting in the additional work on special teams, because if you're a Husker fan the last couple of years, sometimes those special teams moment were not so special. They were almost cringeworthy. And then the development, listen, you've got a kicking game now. You've got kickers who can actually make kicks and have leg and can help you defensively with ball placement and just out-kicking coverage. Buscemi and Company can really give Matt Rhule some comfort in knowing that he's got a punter and a kicker who have been through the wars. He's got some young people behind them to keep them competitive and to allow that work is put in. Bleak Road is legitimate. and being a Big Ten quality punter. And then to have a kicker, and then to have Buscemi and his leg and what he does and being able to flip the field and take some of the burden and pressure off of this Husker defense. Look, the work is being put on special teams. It's good to have kickers, but the returners give you an opportunity to put points on the board and change the game with big plays. And there'll be some of the same guys that you see lining up in the slot and guys that are going to be first down possession guys. And then every now and then there'll be the guys that quarterback drops back and throws the big ball, hoping to make big plays for the Huskers. I have my eyes on practice. I have my eyes on how the players are accepting coaching. I have my eyes on the coaches and the work and the verbiage that they keep putting in. I'm paying attention. That's why I come here to share this with you each and every single day. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen. Each and every single day, your second should be Locked On College NFL Draft. Please find your way over on YouTube or however else you consume your podcast daily. We'll close with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big